All right, so this video is all about baking procedural textures to a texture map in Blender. Okay, so if you make a model in Blender and you are doing all the texturing, the coloring with nodes. So for example, I have this fire hydrant and I had this node setup that gives it dirt, this pattern of dirt, and then there's dirt inside of the crevices, and there is weathering on the edges, and there's all this other stuff. And that's all done procedurally in Blender. Now, if I want to take this fire hydrant and bring it to a game engine like Unity or Unreal Engine, I can't use these nodes because they don't recognize these nodes. And it's much too cumbersome for a game engine to have all this procedural texture. So generally what you do is that once you finish your texture in Blender or whatever program, you bake it into a map. And then the one map is then you're going to be used along with the model in your game engine. And so normally you'd have the model plus a series of maps, the diffuse map, which is the color, or otherwise known as albedo, the roughness map, the shininess and the glossiness, a metallic map maybe, and probably a normal map. So you'd have probably 4 maps, something like that, maybe a few more, and your model, and that's it. No nodes. So we have to go from these nodes to a map. How do we do that? All right, well, let me show you. So the first thing is your model must have UVs. I already made a video about what UVs are, but they are the two-dimensional version of your model. So the model has to have UVs associated with it. So if we go here to UV editing, we see that this model does have UVs. It has been what they call unwrapped, and it has UVs, and the UVs have been laid out onto a grid. So it's just there's no UDIMs, it's just one tile. Okay, so this has been unwrapped. That means we can make a texture map with it. Okay, we go to shading. I'm just going to show you one thing about this, which is going to be useful, is that this particular model only has 2 materials. One is the fire hydrant red part, so the redness and the weathering in the dirt, and the other is just these metal chains and the bolts. So the bolts and the chains are one material, and the red stuff that's weathered is another. So there's 2 different materials, and that's why if we look here, we have 2 slots. This one here is the metal stuff. It's very simple, and this one is the red stuff. Okay, so let's figure out how to do this. So the first thing we need to do is I'm going to just keep it on the regular tab here to save some so it goes faster. All right, so I'm going to actually disconnect the normal map. I'm just going to keep this is the node setup. So I will plug this back in. You won't see anything, but I'm plugging it back in. Okay, so this is our node setup, and this is going to be baked into a map. First thing is add an image texture. This is a node which will accept the map. It's the node is used for viewing and making maps. Okay, so image texture, and I want to make a new one. In this case, I'll call it diffuse hydrant, or actually I'll call it hydrant diffused. Hydrant diffuse. And I can set it at whatever resolution I want. I could set it at 1K, 2K, 4K, whatever. In this case, I'm setting it at half K, half a thousand, which is 512. 1K is 1024, 2K is 2048, etc. So this is a very kind of a small texture map. And the reason I'm doing it this small is because it's just faster for the video. You might want to do your image texture at a higher resolution if you're seeing it from closer, because this won't be a great quality, but it'll be fast. Okay, great. I say, okay, fantastic. So now I have this node ready to accept my texture map that I'm going to make. Now, on the first slot, I need to do the same thing because I still have this material which has been used for the metal. So I actually need to do the same thing here. For every slot in the in your object, in your model, for every different material, I need to put an image texture node. Now that I have it though, I can already I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the same exact map that I used for slot 1. So this is called hydrant diffused. Just make sure. This is also called hydrant diffuse. This is the same map. So I will be baking all these different materials to one map. So all the slots will have the same exact color map, and I'll be baking it to the same map. Okay, so that's there. Let me just make sure this is selected. You have to make sure this is selected. Great, awesome. All right, next step. Normally, by default, Blender has two render engines. They have Eevee and they have Cycles. Workbench is the render engine that you're seeing now, actually. But the real ones are Eevee and Cycles. All of the baking settings are in Cycles. So you have to go to Cycles. By the way, just to make sure you understand, I am now at the Rendering tab. That is the little camera. So if I'm over here, for example, I go to Rendering tab and I make sure that that is at Cycles. All right. Next thing I do is, normally, by default, these tabs where it says maximum samples, that means how many actual samples it's taking to build this image, these are normally much higher. They're at, this one I believe, viewport is at 1024, 1K, and I believe the render is normally at 4096, so it's 4K. You do not need anywhere near this amount of resolution to bake a texture map, and it will make everything super slow. So I changed this to 16, and I also changed this to 16. Now the baking will be much faster and it doesn't seem to have an effect on the image. Okay, so these are both at 16. Wicked, this is a denoise. Now I go to my baking tabs. So I just closed it because it was already open. Look, bake. And now I have a bunch of choices. It says bake type. And you have all these different choices: ambient occlusion, normal map, roughness, and I'm going to choose diffuse because the diffuse map will take the information from the base color tab and bake that onto a map. The metallic map will take this channel, the roughness map will take this channel, the normal will take this channel, etc. Base color is diffuse. Okay, so that's picked. And the other thing I need to do is, normally, right below this part, you have this thing that says contributions. That means what is going to end up in the map. Well, this is direct and indirect lighting. I do not want the lighting to be affecting the map. For example, if it's very bright, I don't want the map to be brighter because all the lighting should be just controlled by the render engine, not by the map. So only thing should be ticked off is color. All right, so that's good. Now, the other thing I need to make sure of is that in all of my materials, the metallic channel should be at 0. So if it's at 1 or whatever, turn the metallic off. I even take the roughness and detach everything and put the roughness at 1. That means it's completely rough and there's no gloss. I'm going to do the same thing here. Make sure that there's not, I don't want any metallic, nope. And I do want the roughness at 1 so it's matte. I don't know if the roughness makes a difference. But the metallic, if you keep the metallic on, all the colors will turn dark and it will screw up the whole map. So you do not want that. All right, so far everything's good. Let me go to actually cycles and just make sure everything's proper. Good, okay, that's what it's going to look like. And now I have to make sure that this map is clicked. This is where it's going. Once again, I just want to make sure that one's clicked. So that is where the texture is going to be baked. Now, if everything is good, I should just be able to press bake and it should work. Let's try. Yes. And now it's going to bake this map. It should be pretty quick. You see the progress there. All right. So we see over there that our map is now actually baked. And that's the map. I want to show you something that I didn't actually show you, is this. There's another setting that's quite important, which is called margin. You see that I'm going to show you the actual texture map up close. My UVs have been turned on. This is how you show the UV overlay. You click this. So if I put my UVs on, you see that the UV islands end at this white line, and there's a slight overlap. It slightly goes beyond where the UVs end, and that gives it a bit of a padding. Now you want a little bit of the padding. That's the result of the reason why it's padded like that is because if I go to my bake settings, here, this is margin. Margin meaning how much further it goes on the UVs. It's set at 4 pixels. So it's going 4 pixels beyond the edge. I could have put it at 2 pixels. But normally the default is 16 pixels. If you do the bake the map and it's at 16 pixels, this would be spread much further and could potentially overlap onto the other UV islands if they're very tight. So I changed it to 4. I probably could even change it to 2, but 4 seems to be okay. So this controls how the spread of how much further the color goes out than the UVs. All right, so let's check to make sure this is right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug my actual base color and I'm going to plug the map in. And if all goes well, once I plug both of these in, it should look exactly like it does now. Unplug that, take this in, plug it. Hey, look at that. All right, so now, oh, let me go back. The reason why these look really weird is because I've turned off the metallic settings. Let me turn the metallic settings back on, especially for those chains, because they look kind of strange when they're just gray. And I will turn that back on. I will turn the roughness down so they're shinier. Let's go back and see it. All right, that's a little bit better. And oh yeah, I had a roughness map, but I didn't bake that. So this is just the color. Actually, I think the roughness was even less. Let me just be sure about that. That's material 2. Yeah, it was more like that. Okay, so that worked well. All of the colors have now been baked onto these maps, and I don't need the nodes anymore. And this model now can be exported, and I have the maps that go along with it. Now, before anything, this texture map has not been saved. And if I just do this, Control S, all I've done is save the model. I haven't actually saved the maps. So you really need to save the maps separately from the model. I click the map, I go onto Texture Paint, and I go into Image, and I do Save As. And I will call this Hydrant Diffuse. Doesn't really matter, whatever you call it, and I'll save it. And now this map has been saved. And if I were to load this onto, whatever, Sketchfab or whatever, any kind of engine, I would now load my model, and then I'd be able to load the texture map that's associated with it, and it should all be good. All right, hopefully that was useful.